ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this 15th day of November 2022, 26 degrees and sunny right here in Brisbane. Once again, welcome to the show and thank you so much for joining in. So today we have the live news updates and of course then we'll be finishing off with our daily India report and the upcoming functions and events. Hi, it's wonderful to see you. So good to have your company on this day. Well, let's see what's making news on this very day. Well, first of all, let's take a look at those situations about the floods.
And first of all, Sean Kearns, if you can just run through some of those real areas of concern for the SES in New South Wales at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. Yeah, our areas of concern are in the western parts and southwestern parts of New South Wales. We've got particular concern around the communities of Molong, Yagowra, Canowindra, Urballong and Condobolin in particular. What we have seen is significant rainfall with those thunderstorms in the west of the state overnight, which did see some significant flash flooding occurring. And that has also led to some rapid river rises impacting a number of those communities. We're also starting to see flash flooding this morning in parks. We've had over 500 requests for assistance in the last 24 hours, with 34 flood rescues, with over half of those occurring since midnight last night.
And are most of those flood rescues involving people that have been caught by those rapidly rising floodwaters in their homes, or is this for people who are actually driving through the floodwaters?
Yes, Steph, it's been a combination of both. What we have seen is with the flash flooding, the creeks and the rivers has risen so quickly, and just with the drainage systems not being able to handle that amount of water, that people have been caught out at home. But there also have been a number who have been caught out as they're driving along, just getting caught on the roadways. So what we are asking people to do is to avoid any unnecessary travel, particularly when there is severe thunderstorms out there. What we are seeing at the moment is any reasonable amount of rain is actually leading to flash flooding, which can catch people out unawares. And the thing is now what we're going to see, the effects of this rain over the coming days and over the coming weeks is going to lead to, unfortunately, further riverine flooding, impacting communities that have only recently started to begin the recovery effort from most recent floodings.
Yeah, I was going to ask about this because this is such a hard slog for the residents in those affected communities and also for emergency services, isn't it? You must be wondering when this is all going to end.
Yeah, look, the predictions we have, this is going to continue for months. Some of these communities are going to keep on getting impacted as the rain comes, and there's predictions that it's going to be quite a wet summer, at least until the end of December. So we are going to see a lot of weather systems occurring like this. So we do ask communities to listen to the warnings that are being issued by New South Wales SES. I'd like to put a big call out and say thank you to all the New South Wales SES volunteers and our partner agencies who are assisting the communities around New South Wales. We do have a number of interstate resources also coming in to assist. So I just want to say thank you to all of them and also the employers who do allow their volunteers to help their communities during the times of disasters like this.
That is just so important, isn't it, to have the lifeblood be able to actually be there to help. And also, obviously, this is such a changing situation with the sodden ground already. What is your advice to people in some of those communities?
Yeah, our advice is that what we are seeing is that any rain with the ground so saturated is just going to run off and lead to further flooding. It's really important that they listen to the warnings that SES have out. We have over 100 warnings, emergency warnings out, with 16 of those at emergency warning where we have asked communities to evacuate. So if you are asked to either prepare to evacuate or to evacuate, that you follow the directions of SES volunteers and other emergency service personnel and take action early. These communities that have already been impacted, unfortunately, there is a chance they're going to be impacted again. So we ask them to prepare for flooding. Have a grab bag ready to go of their important documents and belongings, but also just to take heed of the weather situation that's out there. If there is heavy rain, avoid unnecessary travel. If you do need assistance from SES, to call 132 500, and if it's a life-threatening emergency, to call 000 immediately.
Look, very good advice, and definitely not travelling through those floodwaters because you don't know what's underneath the waterline as well. Sean Kearns, Assistant Commissioner of the New South Wales SES, thanks for your time.
And thank you very much for that report. And of course, I can't stress enough as well, as was said in that report, that if it is flooded, please forget it. And unless it is absolutely necessary, and we know that there are circumstances that where it is necessary to be out there on the roads, keep safe, keep away, and don't drive unless you really have to. Well, right now, from the flood situation, the other emerging situation that we have is the COVID waves. So what's happening with that? We've been told that it's here to stay.
Cases are up more than 60% in Victoria, more than 40% in New South Wales, and hospitalisations in Queensland have doubled in the past week. Here's Dr Norman Swan, the host of the Health Report on RN. Hi, Norman.
Hi.
So we mentioned some numbers there, Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland. How reliable, though, is this data?
It's not that reliable, but they're all showing it, and the trend's all going in the same direction. The national figure is about 46% rise in cases. You can find other data which suggests it's much higher than that, and hospitalisations up about 28% on average around the country. And remember last week when we were talking, there was this anomaly with Queensland that seemed to be showing a reduction, and we said then that can't be true. Sure enough, it's not true. So this, you're right, it's on for young and old with various subvariants involved, and they're now in the majority of cases. BA5 has been pushed to under 50%.
A lot of people are getting COVID for the second time as well. Is it worse for you to get COVID again rather than the initial infection?
It's a really important question. So the first thing to say is that vaccination reduces your risks of long COVID and complications, but they still exist. 5-6% for long COVID, 1 or 2% for really serious complications. That's a lot of people if you've got a lot of people being infected. The data from the United States suggests that reinfection risks, with reinfection, your risk of these complications accumulates as time goes on. So effectively, it does kind of go up as time goes on. So in other words, you may have had a complication last time, in which case you've got the same risk of a complication, if not a higher risk this time around. And some people are suggesting, well, there's one unpublished research paper suggesting that with these subvariants, the risk actually might go up because your immune system is too tuned to the previous infections and it hasn't retuned to these new variants. That's still there. But the problem is more Australians will get sicker longer and more Australians will die. The question is how many, particularly when we're under-vaccinated.
And that is alarming news, that there will be a number of people who will die. They don't yet know what sort of numbers. There's no predictions on that. But the thing is that it's here to stay. So the clear advice is, if in doubt, just get yourself checked and tested. Nothing better than, not knowing. It is not a good situation to be. It's best that you know. So if you're in doubt, get yourself tested. Well, right now, moving on, the other problem that we have is there's been lots of reports that have come in about the rising cost of living. So what sort of pressures are they putting on the community?
Just how difficult is this for former students? And it's really hitting close to home for you, isn't it? Tell us about your situation.
Yeah, so my HECS debt, I was looking the other day. So last year I got indexed around $20. This year it's gone up to about $365, which is a massive increase.
That is quite a jump.
Yeah. And it's going to be even worse for kids like my brother who got the Job Ready Graduates package. So while I pay around 20 grand for my arts degree, he's paying 40 grand for a commerce degree at ACU down the road. And, when you think about the indexation on that and the amount of interest he's going to pay over his lifetime, well, he's being hit by this massive cost of inflation is,
And that makes it hard, of course, for university graduates who want to, for instance, try to get a mortgage, right, to buy a home.
Exactly. There's around 3 million students or, young people that are saddled with this debt. It currently takes around 10 years to pay that off. And, with ballooning student debt, that kind of amount of time it takes to pay it off is just going to increase, and that's going to be affecting these students while they want to move on in life.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people wouldn't actually realise that these debts are actually indexed and do get subjected to inflation. And we're seeing this at the same time as the cost of university degrees goes up.
Yeah, massively. We're seeing, because of job-ready graduates, because of all of these other things, the cost of going to university is massive. And that is really, really hard for students when they also feel like, because of COVID, because of all of these other things, they're not getting the full university experience and they're having to pay these massive fees to do it. It's something that we're looking to address and hopefully see addressed in the university accords, and it's, you know, something we want action on right now.
How would you like it addressed? What are some of the options you'd like universities and the federal government to look at?
Well, the Greens have just announced a fabulous policy in Canberra. It basically freezes indexation. So it means that the 3 million students that are currently affected won't be bearing the brunt of cost of living. It's not going to be following them for the rest of their lives. It's, you know, how long is this inflation going to last? We don't know. But at least for that period, it's frozen. And
it's something you'd like the federal government to consider?
Yes, very much so.
Freezing indexation.
Yeah.
Well, I guess because when it's a low inflation environment, it's a lot more achievable, isn't it? Whereas when you're having a look at how much inflation is increasing, what are some of the stories that you're hearing from some students about how much they're working part-time to pay off this HECS debt, and then they see the debt itself balloon?
Well, that's the thing. I think students are really bearing the brunt of the cost of living crisis. I don't know any of my friends that are living out of homes that aren't working multiple jobs to kind of get through life. We know that student poverty is really hitting home at the moment. It's something the NUS has been doing a lot of work on, because I'm talking to students every day that are crying because they can't pay their bills, and then, you know, when they look to the future, it doesn't look much brighter because they're going to be carrying this massive debt.
Did you look at the recent announcement by US President Joe Biden cancelling student debt, not for all students, but for a lot of students over there, with some degree of envy?
Yes, 100%. I would absolutely adore if the federal government cancelled student debt, made university free. I mean, you know, in my opinion, university education is meant to be a public good. You know, that's like, since when students, you know, went to university, it was meant to be, oh, look, you can get this HECS debt and you worry about it later and it doesn't matter. It just means that you have the opportunity to go to university now. Realistically, that, you know, there's so many more barriers in place to get into university now, and cancelling student debt would be very nice.
Okay, watch this space. Anyway, let's the issues we'll put up.
Sadly, the days of free university are very long gone. It would be nice to see that come back again.
There's certainly issues in terms of indexation worth raising with the Education Minister when he's next on. So thank you, Georgie.
Thank you for having me.
And, well, as we have seen from the students that the HECS and the debts that they get into for their degree in our, well, we want an educated workforce. We want the kids to get their education. But, of course, who pays for it? That's the thing. So students being made to pay for it, and they're getting into these heavy loans, which burdens them for a long time, and the indexation that is way out of proportion as well. So there's something to think about. But right now, staying on the university scene, you know, people have borrowed money and whatever, and then there was a pandemic. What has it done to the university studying? And as per this report, there have been a lot of cheating going on.
What levels of cheating have there been?
Well, the levels of cheating have certainly increased during the coronavirus pandemic. There's been some evidence of that from studies around the world. Exactly the levels is quite hard to determine, but also we have some evidence recently from the University of New South Wales and University of Sydney that they're catching more cases, which is probably a matter of better detection rather than necessarily more cases actually happening.
So this is cheating on exams or in completing assessments, or both?
All kinds of assessments. So cheating on exams, particularly online exams, are a little bit more cheatable than a supervised exam. Essentially, students can cheat on any form of assessment, but it's a lot harder to cheat on some kinds of assessments than others. It requires more planning and effort, and that planning and effort, if it takes a lot to cheat, students are better off putting it into actually studying for their course rather than trying to cheat.
So is the move to online teaching and exams, that's what's responsible for the spike in cheating cases, is it? Or is there something else going on?
Not entirely. So through the coronavirus pandemic, there's been a few things that have happened altogether that have potentially increased cheating. One of them is just the stress and anxiety of the coronavirus pandemic itself. We know that students cheat more when they're under pressure and when they feel stressed and anxious. Also, the move to online teaching, which is a lot of that has been to try to make classes accessible when people can't get together in the same place. That hasn't necessarily been done well, particularly when it was done quickly. And we know students cheat more when they're dissatisfied with the quality of their education. So there's a couple of things like that that have been a problem.
And there are concerns that the scale of these breaches has, quote, normalised cheating. Is that what's happening? Once some students start doing it, the momentum builds until it does become a normal thing to do.
It's potentially the case that students are affected by what other students are doing. So if they think other students are cheating and getting away with it, it can certainly be an encouragement of sorts for them to try to cheat themselves. And that's one of the reasons why it's so good to see some of these universities getting really good at detecting some of the more serious forms of cheating, like students getting other people to do their assessments for them, because that's sending a great message back to students that this is not something that you can readily get away with.
How's this going to impact academic standards, though, Guy, and the quality of the graduates coming through the system over the pandemic years?
It does raise some questions. So if there are students who are getting away with cheating, then we don't know whether they're leaving university having met the learning outcomes of their course. That can be quite serious in situations where the safety of people depend on the professionals that they're interacting with knowing what they're doing. So certainly that's a big concern, and once again I'd say the universities that are getting good at detecting instances of serious cheating are really doing Australia a big favour, because they're making it certainly the case that employers can be more reliant on graduates from those institutions.
Dr. Guy Curtis, thank you.
And there you go, there's some food for thought. Cheating your way through a university and getting a degree makes you wonder, many times people get into some of the jobs and positions, how well qualified are they? They might have a degree, but the way and how was that acquired many times could leave some questions, especially some of the ones who have come from overseas as well. And that is why Australia recognizes only reputable universities and institutions where people bring their qualifications from. Well, right now, that very, very historic meeting is going to take place between Joe Biden and the Chinese Prime Minister.
I think there are so many problems at the moment around the world, so many fractures, serious problems. The war in Ukraine obviously has had international ramifications, both humanitarian in the death and the misery, as well as world food supplies. There's the escalating tensions over Taiwan. There's the rising tensions generally between the United States and China. So this is a fairly precarious situation for the world at the moment. The fact that these 20 countries are even getting together today in Bali for this summit itself is quite an achievement.
So which world leaders are attending, and as importantly, who's not going to be there?
Ros, the only no-show for this conference here in Bali is Vladimir Putin, the Russian leader. Kept saying up until the last week or so that he may come. I don't think he's game to leave Russia for security fears that someone will try to kill him or poison him. So he hasn't shown. Instead, Sergei Lavrov, his foreign minister, has come. Everybody else, the Chinese leader Xi Jinping, has just arrived. And in breaking news, Ros, it's just been confirmed that this afternoon here in Bali, will be that meeting between Presidents Biden and Xi. It'll happen at 5:30 Bali time, which is about 9 p.m. Sydney time.
And overall then, John, how is China being seen at this G20? What are the prospects of a meeting between the Chinese President and RPM?
Well, clearly Anthony Albanese would like to have that meeting. It hasn't been confirmed yet. It's still possible. I think the officials are working non-stop behind the scenes to try to make it happen. But at the last meeting they had, Presidents Biden and Xi, Vice President then Biden said, President Obama and I have nothing to fear from a rising China. Well, that China has risen. It's no longer present tense. It has risen, past tense. That risen China is turning up here in Bali today with a new confidence, some would say an arrogance, because they have leverage into so many of the problems around the world at the moment. They're seen as the only country that can have any leverage with Vladimir Putin to try to get him to stop the war in Ukraine. They're obviously crucial in Taiwan. President Xi has said we will take Taiwan by force if necessary. So many of the problems. It'll be an absolutely fascinating and historic meeting this afternoon between the US and Chinese leaders.
And what would be
An historic meeting. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now it's time to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you reports, interviews, features and more on India and the Indian diaspora. Food and energy security and post-COVID-19 health issues will be on top of the agenda to be raised by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Bali at the G20 summit.
Prime Minister Modi will leave for Bali on November 14th to attend the G20 summit, where food and energy security and post-COVID-19 health issues will be at the top of the agenda at the summit of global leaders on November 15th to 16th in the Indonesian city. During the visit, Modi is expected to meet with several G20 leaders. He will also address the Indian community in Bali and visit a mangrove forest. Modi will also use the opportunity to invite all other G20 leaders to the next summit due to be held in India in September 2023. India takes over the presidency of the global organization on 1st December 2022. It may be noted that G20 nations represent more than 80% of the global GDP. Briefing the media, Foreign Secretary Vinay Quatra said, quote, "This G20 summit is particularly special because India will hold the presidency of the G20 summit from December 1st, 2022 for a one-year period, and the presidency handover will take place during the summit in Bali." End quote. Modi will discuss plans for India's presidency of the G20, including environment and gender issues and a greater voice for the global south in issues of international economic cooperation, the need for reform 21st century institutions. Modi will reach Bali in the evening, skipping the B20 business forum being concluded that day, at which Indonesian President Joko Widodo and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will give keynote addresses, and several global business leaders, including Twitter head Elon Musk, will speak. On November 15th, he will attend 2 working sessions on food and energy security and health partnership for global infrastructure and investment, followed by a dinner for all G20 leaders. Modi will also meet with the Indian community that evening and address to the diaspora living in Bali.
India continues to play a strategic role on trying to help find solution to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. India and Ukraine foreign ministers met and discussed ways to end Russia's war on Ukraine, nuclear concerns and grain initiative.
Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba on November 12th. The two ministers are said to have discussed ways to end Russia's war on Ukraine, nuclear concerns and bilateral cooperation. The meeting was significant after Jaishankar met Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. Jaishankar and Kuleba met on the sidelines of the ASEAN-India summit in the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh. Jaishankar tweeted, quote, "Pleasure to meet FM at Dmytro Kuleba of Ukraine. Our discussions covered recent developments in the conflict, the grain initiative and nuclear concerns," end quote. Kuleba responded saying, quote, "My Indian counterpart at Dr. S. Jaishankar and I met to discuss bilateral cooperation and ways to end Russia's war on Ukraine. I emphasize that Russia must immediately cease deadly attacks, withdraw all troops from Ukraine and commit to peace. We also focused on global food security, end quote. Saurabh Kumar, Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, told reporters in Phnom Penh that they discussed the state of play in the situation in Ukraine. Jaishankar also met US Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Phnom Penh. They spoke about the conflict in Ukraine, the strategic Indo-Pacific region and bilateral relations. Jaishankar said in another tweet, quote, "A good meeting with US Secretary of State at Sec Blinken. Discussed Ukraine, Indo-Pacific, energy, G20 and bilateral relations," end quote. The minister also met many other diplomats and dignitaries attending the summit, including UN Chief Antonio Guterres at the end of the ASEAN Gala dinner.
Indian Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar has reiterated India's support for ASEAN centrality in the evolving regional architecture in the Indo-Pacific region.
Indian Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar has said that India supports ASEAN centrality in the evolving regional architecture in the Indo-Pacific region. He was speaking at the 19th ASEAN-India Summit in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, which is commemorating the 30th anniversary of the India-ASEAN dialogue. During the summit, the delegations declared the establishment of the ASEAN-India Comprehensive Strategic Partnership and reaffirmed the importance of freedom of navigation and overflight in the strategically important region. Vice President Dhankar said, quote, "The cultural, economic and civilizational ties that have existed between India and Southeast Asia since time immemorial provided the strong foundation to build our partnership in modern times, from a sectoral partnership in 1992 to a comprehensive strategic partnership in 2022, end quote. A joint statement issued on the occasion recognized the importance of unimpeded lawful maritime commerce, saying that disputes should be resolved by following universally recognized principles of international law, including the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and the relevant standards and recommended practices by the International Aviation Organization and the International Maritime Organization. Both sides also agreed to intensify maritime cooperation, including anti-piracy operations, armed robbery against ships, maritime safety, search and rescue operations, humanitarian assistance and emergency response and relief. Further, both sides agreed to enhance cooperation in the space sector, including through the establishment of tracking, data reception and processing stations in Vietnam and Indonesia. In a press conference after the summit, Secretary Saurabh Kumar said Indian tourism with Cambodia will receive a boost in the coming months. The number of Indian tourists arriving in the ASEAN region is not very high, but we feel tourism will increase if our connectivity improves.
India Samajwadi Party has fielded Dimple Yadav to contest for the Mainpuri Lok Sabha seat left vacant after party founder and her father-in-law Mulayam Singh Yadav passed away.
The Samajwadi Party has fielded Dimple Yadav, wife of party chief Akhilesh Yadav, for Uttar Pradesh's Mainpuri Lok Sabha seat left vacant after party founder and her father-in-law Mulayam Singh Yadav's death. With family bastion on the line, the SP is hoping to fend off a challenge by the BJP. The by-poll is slated to be held on December 5th. There are 5 assembly constituencies under the Mainpuri parliamentary constituencies, and 2 of the 5 seats are currently held by Akhilesh Yadav and Shivpal Yadav as MLAs. Analysts state that following the legacy of Netaji Mulayam Singh and the values of the Samajwadi Party, Dimple Yadav will win a big victory in the region. The youth and the people of Mainpuri have always been with Netaji, so Dimple Yadav will win not only as a daughter-in-law but also as a candidate. The people of the Mainpuri parliamentary constituency have also termed this election as Netaji's election. Meanwhile, the BJP is gearing up to challenge the SP in its own bastion. Minister and Mainpuri Sadar, MLA Jaiveer Singh, said Netaji's era is over and the people of Mainpuri are eager for a BJP win.
Winter chills set in the national capital Delhi as cold northwesterly winds enter the region.
With cold northwesterly winds blowing towards the Indian national capital, Delhi's minimum temperature has dipped by over 4 degrees in the last 4 days and is set to dip even further, having touched the 10 centigrade mark on November 12th. The sudden drop in temperatures is being attributed to the western disturbance, which departed the region on November 11th, allowing colder winds to start blowing once again. According to the long period average, the average normal minimum temperature for the capital between November 12th and 16 is 13.6 degrees Celsius. Since the western disturbance, snowfall has been experienced in some places. The minimum temperature may be up slightly in the next 2 days. Another dip is expected closer to the weekend. According to experts, wind direction may briefly become easterly, which could lead to a slight increase, but the overall wind direction will remain northwesterly in the next 7 days. Owing to that, the minimum will gradually dip further.
England becomes the first country to hold both 50 over and T20 World Cup crowns as it beat Pakistan by 5 wickets in the final of the ICC T20 World Cup.
Jos Buttler led England registered a famous win over Babar Azam's Pakistan to secure their second T20 World Cup title on November 13th. All-rounder Ben Stokes remained unbeaten on 52 of 49 balls to take his team home in the low-scoring thriller as England managed to finish ahead of Pakistan's side in the summit clash of the T20 World Cup 2022. England won the match by 5 wickets to lift the famous trophy for the second time at the iconic Melbourne Cricket Ground. With this win, England became the first dual white ball champions, holding both the 50 and 20 over titles. Jos Buttler's side restricted Pakistan to 137-8 in front of a huge crowd of 80,462 fans at a heaving Melbourne Cricket Ground, with player of the match Quran bagging 3-12 and Adil Rashid chipping with 2-22. Quran was also named the player of the tournament. In reply, England slumped to 49 for 3 in the 6th over as they struggled to get any momentum against a fiery pace attack with boundaries hard to come by. But Stokes and Moeen Ali used their experience and cool heads to guide England to 138-5 with 6 balls to spare, climaxing a riveting tournament that spanned 45 games over nearly a month.
Telugu cinema star Samantha Ruth Prabhu's film Yashoda is nearing $500,000 in collections at the US box office, surprising the industry with its consistency.
Samantha Ruth Prabhu is one of India's biggest female stars. She has once again demonstrated her ability to command strong openings in her name. Her latest film Yashoda is performing well at the box office thanks to her fame. On opening day, the movie was able to draw a respectable audience to the theatres. The movie is doing well at the box office, surprising the industry with its consistency. Yashoda has already become a huge hit in the United States after only 2 days. By November 12th, the film had earned $350,000. As a result, the distributors have reached the break-even point. They will now reap the benefits in the coming days. After grossing $200,000 on day 1, Yashoda grossed another $150,000 on November 12th. The film is on its way to crossing the $500,000 mark. Interestingly, Yashoda is the only Telugu film that broke even in the last 2 months. While Nag Chaitanya's Thank You grossed over $188,000, Samantha's film grossed $350,000 in 2 days. In India, Yashoda is doing well outside of the Telugu-speaking states as well. Its second-day sales exceeded those of the release day. On its first day, Yashoda brought in roughly 3 crores in the Telugu states. The trade forecasts a revenue increase for the movie of over 30%. Additionally, weekends may generate incredible profits for the movie. The increase in sales is encouraging and Samantha's fans are very enthusiastic about this stunning performance. The movie is also doing well at Tamil Nadu and Malaysian box offices.
That's all for this bulletin of the Daily India Report.
And thank you very much for that report, Ankita. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now it's time to take a look at some of the functions and events taking place. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have time for you today. It's been wonderful having your company on this 15th day of November. Well, the temperature right here in Brisbane is 27 degrees and sunny. And thanks everyone for joining in. I'd like to talk about the Queensland Sangeet Mela Association's Sahana Banerjee. On Saturday 19th, a wonderful concert. She's just an amazing artist all the way from Kolkata will be performing here. Please do come along. Tickets are still available. We'd like to see that if you can all make it to this wonderful event. It is not always do we get a chance to witness this kind of artist who are just such talented and such wonderful artists coming right here on our doorsteps. So, ladies and gentlemen, until tomorrow, it's a goodbye from us. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, remain safe and be good.